Okay, we have a little bit for our next round of the tournament, so let's go over these new patch notes. Let's see. Taro Adun, we are excited to push patch 5.0.11 to PTR, which features various amounts of balance, bug fixes, and quality of life improvement done by our community members. Exciting. This is the first patch we got since March, and the scroll bar is longer than the one we got in March, so maybe the biggest patch we've got in a few years. About time. Taro Dude, toss patch confirmed. Okay, let's start with Zerg. Creep Tumor. Cooldown increased from 11 to 13 seconds. So this is the cooldown on respreading tumors. So if you make a creep tumor, then that creep tumor has a cooldown before it can make another creep tumor. So that's increased 11 to 13 seconds. And the sight range is reduced from 11 to 10. So I don't know if all you guys know this, but a creep tumor right now, it can see 11 range, but only spreads creep 10 range. So it gives more vision than it does creep spread. So this just brings it down exactly to how much creep it gives. So it's very clear, like, to the opponent where there's vision and where there's not, if there's creep, right? If the units are off creep, they definitely are out of vision. If they're on creep, they're in vision, which is at least once the creep tumor is finished spreading, which is, it's nice for the opponent, and creep is obviously extremely strong, so just tuning it down a little bit, but not too much. And this is more effects like the mid-game creep spread, where, like early mid-game creep spread, where you're not making new tumors with queens, but just respreading. So it's more like a quality of life change. It's also a balance change, though, right? Because you see less on the edge of your creep everywhere on the map. So in the ground areas, of course, it doesn't affect the areas where you have overlords, but it affects the ground areas where you just have creep tumors. Okay, next, hatchery layer and hive. Creep spread interval decreased from 0.3 to 0.25. So this is the speed it takes for the creep to appear around your hatcheries. So like when you build a new base and there's creep comes out of the hatchery, this is how fast it spreads. And then sight range increased from 10, 11 to 12 to 12. So 12 is already the sight range of hive. Hatchery was 10, layers 11, so now it's just all consistent. Hatchery layer and hive all spread creep at a 12 radius. So this just, it's similar to this change here, where it makes the vision equal to the creep spread. Is sight range changed when building? No, it is not. Sight range for all buildings is exactly 4 when they're building. Any building, it's always the same. So the range when the building is completed doesn't affect that. I believe there's no building that's different than 4 right now. So this is just to give a little more vision around your natural, and because you're going to have less creep spread in the mid game, it just lets you place your first tumor a little bit farther out. Also, in like Zerg vs Zerg, for example, you always want to be walling off with your Baneling Nest, your Evo, for example. So it'll be more consistent that you should always be able to place the building where you want to by the time you want to build an Evo or a Baneling Nest. At the edge of your natural, it should just give you that opportunity. So that's nice that we get a more consistent wall off in Zerg vs Zerg. Especially if you go like a 2-base wall off, the Evo could always be sketchy, where you might not have creep to place on certain maps, depending how big the natural is. Does this make a difference between connecting creep from main to nat? Like you don't have to put a tumor there anymore? No, because it doesn't actually increase the radius. It's just how fast the creep comes out of the hatchery. So if there's a map where there's a gap between the main base and natural, you'll still have to build a creep tumor if you want to connect them. And yeah, so this is just a slight buff to the hatchery layer and hive, like vision and creep, and this is a nerf to the creep overall that's outside your bases. So I mean, like very slight advantage defensively, where say against proxy racks, for example, where they have less time where they can get a bunker out at your natural, or your links have a bit more creep to run on to chase, but definitely you're going to have less creep in the mid game. And it more affects the top level of players than the lower level of players, because the higher level you are, like the more chance that you're respreading instantly when the creep tumors off cooldown at the lower level. It's more like when you remember to spread creep, you spread creep. So it definitely is a bigger nerf at the top levels, which I think is what people want with Zerg, because it's more like the top few players in the world that make Zerg very strong. Okay, next, let's go to the actual units. Viper added 0.71 second cast finish time to abduct. Cannot move or use other abilities during this time. So if you guys have played Protoss and use Storm, the High Templar is a very similar thing, where after you Storm, there's like a very slight time where you can't move after. So it prevents you from like double storming instantly with the High Templar, and this is the same thing with a Viper. So you can't shift Q to abducts and like move command back with a Viper, and then the Viper will run forward and spit out two abducts and like already be flying back by the time it happens. And it actually like looks a bit better visually with this change, because the Viper's in place while it's abducting, right? It's not flying back and there's just an abduct coming out of midair and pulling the unit back. So it's a slight nerf to the Viper, especially in like the late game against Sky Toss or abducting units just multiple times at once. Yeah, so Viper is obviously a very strong unit in the late game, but I think there's some other changes that for the other races as well. Didn't even know that was possible. I think I might have a YouTube video I can link real quick showing the difference. From a long time ago. Maybe here. Four oh 7, 14, 50, 45. Okay, so here's what it looks like before the patch, and here's what it looks like with the patch. With the abduct, if you shift Q2. So just link that in chat real quick. Next, Ultralisk, exciting. Reduced size by 12.5%. So Ultralisk finally getting smaller. Won't get blocked as much by your own units or buildings, stuff like that. So this is a visual change as well as the pathing change. Oh, you can't see? Sorry about that. Okay, out of frame. Now it's in frame. So reduced size by 12.5%, increased range slot from 1 to 1.4. So what this does is when a unit is running away from the Ultralisk and it's playing its attack animation, now the enemy has to run farther before the Ultralisk attack will get cancelled. So right now Ultralisks are basically useless against units that are kiting, unless you have fungal. And now there's it's more chance that it'll hit its attack. It's not always going to hit its attack against fast-moving units, of course, but because Ultralisk, I think, has the longest attack animation of any melee unit. I'm not sure if it's of any unit. Hellion is also a pretty long attack animation. Maybe Dark Templar is also pretty long, but I think Ultralisk might be the longest for the pre-swing animation before the damage is done, where it can get cancelled. And it always had the same miss range as every other melee unit, so it just had a very high chance of missing. So this just makes Ultra, it doesn't give any like direct stat buffs to the Ultras, but it's just a few changes to try and get the Ultralisk more usable. Isn't this an Ultralisk buff? It is a buff. It's a small buff, but like there's no buff to the stats like the HP, the cost, or armor or anything. It's just changing a few things that made Ultras very annoying to use because they were too big and then they missed most of their attacks anyways. So they'll still be weak against Immortals, Ghosts, etc., but they'll be a bit more usable. The size change affect the attack AoE. No, the attack AoE is unchanged. That equates to 2 pixels smaller. It actually looks much smaller in game. It actually looks much smaller in game. After this online tournament, I'll go in game and show you guys some stuff in the PTR. Next exciting one, we have the Hydralisk. Muscular augment move speed bonus increase from 0.79 to 1.05. So the Hydralisk currently, it's the same speed as a Roach if you don't have the speed upgrade in the current patch, but the speed upgrade you get for it actually doesn't increase the move speed as much as like most other speed upgrades in the game. So this increases the move speed from the upgrade to the same as the Roach move speed upgrade. So the Hydralisk will be much faster, allowing you to, well, it keeps up with like your Lingbane, for example, and it kites better. If you make them with Roaches, then they don't, say you're retreating with a Hydra Roach. Right now your Hydras are slow, but they have more range, so they block your Roaches from retreating. Like you never see people play Roach Hydra. But it's a slight little, what's the F? Why are you guys typing F? F? Did the stream die? You guys scamming me in chat. No, 0 drop frames again. Jesus. Okay, let me check the bracket real quick. Okay, we still don't have any opponent. So let's keep going. So yeah, so the Hydra will now be more movable after the speed upgrade, which is nice. Right now it's a very slow unit compared to other Zerg units. But now it'll keep up with the rest of your army, which is very nice. And damage point reduced from 0.15 to 0.1. So damage point is what I was talking about with the Ultra. It's the pre-swing animation. So when the Hydra starts attacking, it takes 0.15 seconds for the projectile to launch before you can move it again. So like when you're stutter stepping, for example, now it'll take 33% less time per attack before you can turn around and start retreating again. And this has a side effect. This makes it much more kiteable because it also is going to be moving faster. But a side effect is against low HP targets, it'll make the Hydralisk a bit stronger because there's less of a chance that it'll overkill the target, right? Because, or it'll waste less time. So say it starts an attack animation right now, in the 0.15 seconds, if the target dies, then it'll have to restart attacking something else. So against low HP targets like Interceptors, especially, and Marines somewhat, stuff like that, it'll just do a little bit better overall. It doesn't literally increase the DPS against a single target because the cooldown time of the unit starts from before the damage point. So against a single target, it'll do exactly the same damage. It'll be a bit more kiteable, but it'll do exactly the same overall damage against a single target. But against lower HP targets, like a bunch of them, then overall, if you have a bunch of Hydralisks, you'll get a little bit more damage with your army. Just slightly. But it's a nice thing, especially against Interceptors, because Hydras are incredibly bad against Interceptors with the long damage point. That's part of the reason why Marines are so much better than Hydras against Interceptors, is because they have no projectile and the damage point is much lower. So there's no overkill, and they can spread their attack, well, similar to no overkill, but they spread their attack out much better between the Interceptors. So even if you calculate like the cooldown times damage, Marines will do much better than Hydralisks, even if you made those equal, just because of the animation and the projectile time it takes to hit. Next, Broodlord. Move speed increased from 1.97 to 2.3. So Broodlord is currently like the slowest unit in the game for combat units, other than Queen off Creep, I believe, and like Overlords. So this will just make it a bit more movable, but this is coupled with a pretty big nerf here, which is the Broodling duration nerf. So Broodlords will not be able to siege from far away, like we've seen recently in the Zerg vs Terran matchup, where you can attack your own creep tumor or broodlings or changeling and then send the broodlings in and continuously do that, because 3.5 seconds is not really enough time for them to move forward and fight the enemy. It's a pretty significant duration nerf. So yeah, no more like continuous free unit spam forever, which is not really the funnest interaction for anybody. Similar to like Swarm Host in the past, etc. But the unit should be a little bit more movable other than that. Also, this has a side effect of it'll do a little bit less DPS overall, especially if it's attacking like a base where the broodlings aren't dying other than the timed life. And sometimes in fights where the broodlings aren't getting killed fast enough, it'll reduce the damage. So it makes it a bit more movable around the map because the Broodlord is so incredibly slow, but it has a bunch of drawbacks as well. Yeah, thanks, Dark, on the sieging from long range. And I think finally for Zerg, we have this Ravager change. So build time increased from 12 to 17 seconds. I think this is incorrect, actually. This is on the old Blizzard time. So this isn't... You have to divide this by 1.4 to get the proper numbers, I believe. So 12 over 1.4, it's actually 8.57 seconds or 8.6 seconds to 12.14 seconds or 12.1 seconds. So this is on the old Blizzard time that we used in Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm. So this isn't actually 100% accurate. It is instead, if you go 17 minus 12 divided by 1.4, it's actually 3.57 second build time nerf, not a 5 second build time nerf. So it looks worse than it is. But really it is meant to make it so you have to have a little bit more heads up when a push is coming. You can't just morph a bunch of Ravagers last minute and then be completely fine to defend. Also, it might make like all-ins a bit weaker in Zerg vs Zerg, something like that, where right now you can morph Ravagers with the low HP roaches and then they'll heal back to full HP, stuff like that. So it's just makes the Ravager take a bit longer to build, which it built extremely quickly compared to every other unit, so it's a fair change. It'll make cannon rushes a bit harder to defend, but cannon rushes haven't really been an issue in the PvZ matchup since the last patch came out, where the shield battery energy was reduced. And most of the time you don't actually make Ravagers to defend cannon rush nowadays. Like, you don't need to. If you play one gas roachling, for example, then you can... It's usually a more solid response if you're not trying to actually kill the Protoss straight up. What is PTR? It's Patch Test Realm, I think. Something like that. So the patch isn't live in the game. Public Test Realm, that's right. Okay, the patch isn't live, but everyone can go on and play test it if they want right now. You can play a separate ladder, or I think you can host custom games as well. Test stuff out that way. So next we have, yeah, it's a testing mode, exactly. Next we have Protoss. Let's go down. First off, we have Protoss Shield Battery. Battery overcharge. Recharge rate reduced from 200% to 150%. So we got a nerf on the green battery. We got a nerf on the green battery, the photon overcharge, battery overcharge after 2 years, 2.5 years, which reduces the recharge rate by 25%. So reduces the increase by 50%. You could also say it that way. So this just makes it so you actually have some chance of succeeding in an attack even if you can't kill the battery while you're attacking. Of course, it'll still be very rough attacking into a green battery if you can't kill it, but it gives you more of a chance to fight there. Also, even if you do kill the battery, it'll heal a little bit less before you kill it in like every scenario. So I think it's a nice change because, of course, it's very hard to attack into one battery right now, especially outside of like TVP. But even in TVP, like against a tank push, they just put a Colossus in the battery range and then your tanks do nothing. So, long time coming, I think. Long time coming on the battery nerf. Next we have Observer. So this is mostly a buff. We see move speed increased from 2.63 to 2.82. So a few years ago there was a patch that buffed the Observer move speed, and I think that was double this buff. So that increased it to around 3.01. I'm not sure the exact number, but it's approximately 3.01. So this is just half of that buff that's gone back into the game. So just make observers a bit quicker, a bit more usable for scouting in the early game. Right now, most people just rely on Stargate with their oracles always, or hallucination. So also for creep clearing, it'll make the observer a little bit better. It'll be harder to die to queens, for example. So just a nice little buff to the observer. A lot of people are asking for that. They say nerf to be reverted, but it was more like a buff getting reverted in the past, so going through with like half of the original buff. And then model size increased by 17.5%. So this is just to reduce the amount of times where, for example, you just get really punished because you didn't know they had an observer in your base and it's just sitting there for like 10 minutes, or you just, as a Terran player, you scan because you're not sure. You're like, well, I have to make sure, but, and then you just waste a scan. So it'll be a bit more visible, like the little shimmer should be a bit bigger for the opponent. So it's a buff to the observer move speed, but it's also reduces the amount of like bad interactions where the opponent just didn't know there was an observer there. You're watching the React video right now? Yeah, we have a YouTube linked mysteriously below the Twitch stream now. Maybe put this up there. Archon can now fit between single gap walls. So in Starcraft, all the units have a collision size with other units, and they have a collision size with buildings, and they're actually unrelated. So we were able to only change the size with buildings from the Archon. So it can now like walk between a small wall in, which means in PvP you won't wall yourself out. In PvZ, of course, you want to make a wall so it won't block itself. If you're recalling your army, a lot of the time the Archons get stuck. So it's just a very annoying for the Protoss players where the Archons get stuck, and if you don't have a Warp Prism, then it's a real feel bad for the Protoss. You have to kill your own buildings and stuff. It'll make it slightly better aggressively, especially against Terran, where it's a bit harder for them to wall them out, and defending against drops as Terran or defending against mutas, they'll walk through your own base a little bit easier, so it's nice that way. This is huge. I lost yesterday because of chunky Archons. A lot of people have over the years, I think. Let me change the music up real quick. Okay, we got Brood War music, fitting. Do you know if they will make this patch before IEM? I believe, well, the last time the PTR went live a week before the patch came out, but of course we have Home Story coming up, so I mean, it's very unlikely to come out before Home Story Cup. But it should be out before Katowice, right? Okay, next we have High Templar. Move speed increased from 2.63 to 2.82. So this just lets your High Templars keep up with your army a little bit better. They're usually the slowest unit in your army. They'll be able to escape from banelings a little bit better. And this is just to try and make High Templars used a bit more often in combination with the upcoming change, which is the Disruptor change. High Templars still have water balloons, that is true. Speed Templar, no, it's the same, it's exactly the same speed buff as the Observer, so these two units will keep up with your army a little bit better. Could be a bit more active on the map without losing the High Templars. Then we have Disruptor. Purifier orb radius reduced from 1.5 to 1.35. I'm excited about this. This is what I'm most excited about, other than the Hydras perhaps. So Purifier orb radius reduced from 1.5 to 1.35. So if you do the math real quick, you can just do like 1.35 squared over 1.5 squared. So it's technically a 19% area reduction, but it's a little bit less than that because it only has to clip the radius of it. It only has to clip the edge of a unit to hit it, and then it does full damage. So I believe it's less than the 19% if you just calculate the area. Just with how it'll work out. It'll probably be more like, I don't know, 15% or something. It's 10%? No. Well, it's 10% in the radius, but it's a circle, so you have to square it, basically. Yeah, you have to square it because you multiply both by pi and it just cancels out when you divide it. So you just square the difference. You take 1.35 squared over 1.5 squared, and then 1 minus that, and that's the difference. So disruptors, they'll hit a bit less. Disruptors, of course, they're extremely good defensively, especially against Zerg. And then against Terran, there's no real counter to the disruptor on the ground. Once they get like a big disruptor count in the late game, it's just extremely difficult for Terran to engage. So it'll make it a bit more doable for the opponent there. Please give me a few words about War Dog's tactics. I have no idea what you're talking about. Thank you, Jack Koshu 5 for the Prime sub. Thank you, thank you. Okay, next we have Carrier. Interceptor shields reduced from 40 to 30. Interceptor attack target priority reduced from 20 to 19. Interceptor flying radius around target increased. So 3 separate changes here. This is the biggest straight nerf to the Carrier, is the Interceptors have less shields, so it's easier for... This is mainly for ground units fighting into the Carriers. They'll just trade a bit better because they can actually have a better chance of killing the Interceptors. Right now, Marines are alright against Interceptors, Ghosts are pretty good against them, Hydras are not very good, Queens are okay. So it'll... Stalkers stalk against Interceptors as well. So this just makes it more of a choice for the opponent if they're going to try and kill the Carrier or kill the Interceptors, because they have a bit more chance of killing the Interceptors and having an effective trade there. And then second, Interceptor attack target priority reduced from 20 to 19. So this has been a change that a lot of people have been requesting for a long time. And what this means is most units, almost every unit has an attack target priority of 20. And the higher the attack target priority means that those units will be prioritized if you just A move. So this just means if your unit is attacking and there's Interceptors or a different unit in range, they'll prioritize the other unit. They'll only shoot the Interceptors if that's like the only threatening unit in range. So this just means if you like move command your Corruptors in range and then A moves, they'll shoot the Carriers. They won't shoot the Interceptors. So this is a very big change for like the lower level Zergs, for example, where they actually can fight Sky Toss now, right? It'll be somewhat of a buff at the high level too, because you don't have to be worried about Storm now. Because right now, if you're fighting Carriers, if you right click a Carrier with Corruptors, which you have to do if you want to actually fight the air army, all your Corruptors will be clumped up, and it's very hard to stop that from happening. So this just makes it easier to avoid splash damage for the Zerg. And then Interceptor flying radius around target increased. This is mostly a buff to the Interceptor because it means that you can't fungal and hit every Interceptor that's attacking a target, or parasitic bomb and hit every single Interceptor, right? So the Interceptors will just fly a bit farther around. They'll be slightly weaker against ground fighting units as well in this case, but this is just so that the Interceptor isn't too weak against AoE after the shields is reduced. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. Okay. So yeah, it's some nice changes to the carrier. This middle one will especially help the lower level Zergs micro against carriers in the late game, where they can reasonably fight with corruptors now. But you can also hold position your ground units if you want them to just like shoot the interceptors and not like run forward, attack anything else, right? So that they just attack the units in range, even if those have lower attack priority. So this gives a bit more of a choice for the opponent how to micro against the carriers as well, which is nice. What's the effective change of this? Does carrier get prioritized over interceptors? Yeah, basically every unit will get prioritized over the interceptors now. Exactly. So the carriers, void rays, whatever. No, you can't shift click the interceptors. You can't click on them. In Brood War you could, which was one of the hardest points of using carriers, I think, is you have to attack click everything, and not clicking your own interceptors was like the hardest part. Sentry. Build time reduced from 26.4 to 22.9 seconds. This change, I think, is aimed more at PvP and PvT. In PvZ, you almost never make a sentry out of the gateway. And this is just so that you can get a scout off quicker with hallucination. Stuff like that. Where there's no real all-ins that will get stronger from this. Like maybe you could say you can make a sentry earlier without immortal all-in against Zerg, but this is not really that relevant because sentry all-ins aren't scary against Zerg. So this is more of a scouting change for PvT, PvZ. It's a nice change. It only actually changes anything before Warp Gate is out, because you're still going to convert all your gateways to Warp Gates when Warp Gate's done. This is an early game change to help Protoss with scouting. No, it doesn't affect Warp Gate cooldown. And lastly, we have the Forge upgrade research time reduced. And again, similar to the Observer change up here, this is a half revert of the original nerf on the upgrades. So at first they were increased by 14, 18, and 22 seconds, I believe. So now this is just reducing it by half. And we'll see how that works out, but there was big issues with, after the Chrono Boost got changed back to the current state, like the upgrade timings could be too strong in PvT with like going fast 2-2 and doing a big Zealot Stalker timing. It would be very, very difficult for the Terran defense, so not going all the way there with the Forge upgrades. So but it's still making it a bit faster, so Protoss upgrades are a bit more in line with the other races on the Forge. Faster Protoss upgrades, Smooge. Yeah, patch in the works. Very excited. Terran, let's move on to Terran. Ghost. You guys ready for this? I'm ready for this. Enhanced Shockwaves upgrade removed. That's a big one. But EMP radius is increased. So it's not a straight nerf. What does enhanced shockwaves do? It increases the radius of EMP from 1.5 to 2. So now you're getting half of the upgrade for free, but you can never get it to the full area that it had before. So it might make some ghost timings a bit stronger against Protoss, but overall it'll make the ghost weaker in the very late game because you'll need more EMPs to cover the enemy army. It'll make Ghost a bit weaker in Spellcaster versus Spellcaster because you'll have a bit less range overall with EMP, and sneaking one Ghost in, you can EMP less Spellcasters. So it's not a gigantic nerf to the Ghost, but it's a little bit of a nerf there. And then here we have an exciting one. Steady targeting is cancelled. Steady targeting is the official term for snipe. Is cancelled if the target moves more than 13.5 range away from the ghost while casting. Cast range is 10. So right now, one of the biggest problems in the late game is if you ever get too close to the Terran army, they can queue up snipes on a lot of your units and then scan. And then no matter how far you run away, you could be 20 range away with a Zergling, and snipe will still hit you. So this just punishes like engagement, like trying to fight, trying to like run around, trying to get an angle to attack right now. Either you have to full commit as a Zerg, or you don't even get close to them. And now most units will be able to retreat. I think the Broodlord, even if the snipe is cast on max range now, sorry, they'll still be able to escape. They won't be able to escape, I think, with the Broodlords, but basically every other unit you should be able to escape if it's cast at max range. If it's cast at a shorter range, then of course a lot of units won't be able to escape, but it's a very nice change that doesn't just change the stats of the ghost, like reducing the damage, increasing the supply, something like that. So it's a bit of a safer change there. So the ghost, it's getting a bit of a nerf, but it's not like a massive nerf. And I believe at the very bottom there's another thing that I think maybe should be with the ghost here. If we scroll all the way down to this one, ghost steady targeting a snipe can now be manually cancelled. So this, before as the Terran you could not choose to cancel the snipe manually, but now, especially because the unit can escape from the range, if you see that's going to happen, you don't want your ghost to be channeling a pointless snipe, you can just press escape to cancel a snipe. So that's a little quality of life thing for the Terrans there. Okay, let's keep going with the Terran changes. Now we have the Banshee here. Banshee. Hyperflight rotors upgrade time reduced from 121 to 100 seconds. Hyperflight rotors cost reduced from 150 to 125, 125. So this is just trying to get basically upgrade that's almost useless tried out a bit more, because 121 is really an insanely long amount of time. Buffing 4 GG, are we? Trying to get Euthermal to GM? Yeah, exactly. Right now, it's basically never used in pro games. We saw it from Maru in the grand finals of GSL recently, but like, it's more of a build that just catches your opponent off guard, and even then it's not that scary. So it's just maybe letting Terrans try and work it into their build a bit more. Give them a new thing to try out, right? Which is nice. More variation is always nice. Next we have Cyclone. Megfield Accelerator damage bonus, which Megfield Accelerator is the Cyclone upgrade for lock-on. So damage bonus changed from plus 20 versus armor to plus 10 versus everything. So it just makes it a more all-around upgrade at buffing the lock-on. And I'm not sure exactly what this change is good for. It's the change that some of the Terrans wanted to do. I think it might make it slightly more useful in TVZ if you're trying to play mech, because a lot of the Zerg units that are used against mech are not armored. Like you have Queens, Mutas, Ravager, Bane, right? You almost never make Roaches. It'll be a bit weaker against Corruptors and Roaches, but those are not used very much. You make Corruptors against Battle Cruisers, that's about it. So this is just a slight change. It's not necessarily a buff. It's probably a slight buff, but it's also weaker against Stalkers and a few other things. Ravagers are not armored. No, Ravagers have no armor tag. Alright, moving on, we have Sensor Tower. Radar range reduced from 30 to 27. So, a nerf to the Sensor Tower. It's in the same kind of change as the nerf to creep. It's just giving a bit less map vision from without having units there to the Terran, as with the Zerg. It's to try and get Terrans to camp a little less, right? Right now, especially on certain maps like Inside and Out, if you make 2 sensor towers, you can cover more than half of the map from relatively safe areas. So it just gives the opponent a bit more chance to get some damage done. And you can't look at this basically as a radius change completely. Yes, if you look at the radius, then it is, if we go 27 squared over 900, it's the same radius change effectively as the Disruptor, right? 19%. But most of the sensor tower range is not utilized because it's going to be lucky into your own base. So it's only like on one side where it really matters. But yeah, this is just a bit of a change similar to the creep change, where it gives you a little less map vision. You have to keep units on the map if you want to be scouting stuff. Prevents turtling a little bit more. And now we have a bunch of changes on the Raven. This is the most changes of any unit. So it'll have less gas cost, so it's cheaper. Build time is much faster, much faster, 43 to 30. Starting energy increased. Interference matrix duration reduced. Anti-armor missile armor reduction reduced. The upgrade is removed, the energy upgrade, starting energy upgrade. And auto turret energy cost increased. So this will just make the Raven easier to get out, right? You can make one early in the game, spending less starport time and a bit less gas. But it'll make the Raven a bit weaker and much less massable, especially with the auto turret change. So it won't make it like too obnoxious in defending as a Protoss player. Like if you did these changes without the auto turret change, then they would just hide them behind your base and constantly spam auto turrets. But maybe we'll see them less in TVT in the late game, or we'll still see them because of interference matrix, but we'll see less auto turret spam, which I think is nice. And maybe we'll see them use more against Zerg for detection. Maybe build orders can say you open a Viking, 3cc bio Viking. Maybe you'll have time to squeeze in a Raven with a build order because it takes 13 less seconds to build. We'll see what Terrans do with this change, but basically all the abilities are a bit weaker, but it's easier to get out. So it should change up the Terran builds a little bit. It'll be easier to defend against DTs, for example. It'll be less of an investment. If they're going 4-gate blink, it'll hurt you a little less to have open Raven, for example. Yes, Pig. The Interceptor flying radius change was increased to make it less vulnerable to fungal and parasitic bomb. Because with less shields, then it would die too easily to AoE, basically. So I think that's everything for the balance changes themselves. I can quickly go over the quality of life stuff, and then I have to play my match against your alt. So let's do that real quick. So all units, follow acquire range reduced from 5 to 2, which means if you right click on your own unit, generally this is done by accident when you're retreating. If you right click your own unit, your unit will not actually retreat, because when it gets within 5 range of your own unit, then it'll start looking for targets and go fight again. So it just makes follow generally do what follow is supposed to do, where you right click your own unit and it'll actually go there instead of starting to fight randomly, which is very obnoxious. You right click on your own creep tumor and your unit just starts fighting instead of running. Dark Templar, attack blink delay reduced from 0.75 to 0.71. This doesn't really do anything. It makes it a little less clunky to use when you blink. It makes it exactly 1 second on the old Blizzard seconds. Factory increase maximum spawn radius by 1. Basically, your mech unit's gonna get stuck a lot of the time, depending on your base layout, because the tech lab blocked the exit on like Thors and tanks, for example. So that just reduces the chance that happens. It's harder to wall in a factory and stop the unit from spawning by accident. Widow Mine reduce the random unburrow/burrow delay. So right now, as a very big randomness on how long it takes to burrow before Drilling Claws upgrade. So sometimes you can get unlucky and the Widow Mine burrows much slower, or it burrows very fast and the opponent is unlucky. And then it'll no longer automatically target Zerg eggs. Here we have a bug fix with the Cyclone, where the lock-on would be on cooldown if it's in a medevac. I think Hero Marine mentioned that a few times on his stream, this bug. And lock-on, again, no longer targets Zerg eggs without a manual order. Right now, units will never acquire eggs as a target with their auto attack, but these abilities would target the eggs automatically. So it's just, you can still do it on the eggs if you want to, but it's now similar to the actual attack of the units, where you don't accidentally waste your abilities on the eggs, where your attack wouldn't get wasted in the same way. Shield battery bug finally getting fixed. You can't hold down stop on the shield battery. to make it heal faster. Nice to see that. I think that bug was known about for a long time, but we're finally getting it fixed. Adept fixed an issue where adepts cannot be ordered to cancel the shade ability when selected with adepts who are not finished warping in. This is just a quality of life change right now. If you warp into adepts and then you select them with adepts that are already warped in and are shading, then the rally button had priority over the cancel button. And the rally button on the adepts that are warping in. So it just makes it easier to cancel the shade when you were in that case, where no one actually uses the rally button, so it's just weird that it worked that way. It's just a nice fix. And also, if you tell them to go into Warp Prism, it'll just automatically cancel the shade. Right now, it does nothing unless you manually cancel the shade, then click the Warp Prism. So it'll just work the same as Disruptor. You just right-click in the Warp Prism, and it'll go in without having to press Escape, which is very nice. As first world problems, exactly. Queen fixed an issue where initial creep tumors could be cancelled. So this is just a while ago they made it so you couldn't cancel the respread tumors anymore, which would refund the creep tumor cooldown on the creep tumors. But right now, if you make a creep tumor with a queen, they still have a cancel button, and if you cancel them, they just die and you don't get the energy back or anything. So it makes no sense to have a cancel button there. So that cancel button has been removed. And they're no longer unable to receive certain orders for 0.6 seconds after spawning. So the queens play an animation right now when they spawn, and they can't move or attack. But if you tell them to inject or creep tumor, then they'll actually start moving, even during this time. So that just makes it a bit more consistent with how the queen works after it finishes for 0.6 seconds, which is I don't think a lot of people even know about this, but it's fixed. Lurker attacks will no longer be blocked by certain low-ground terrain features. So right now, if there's dead space, the lurker will doesn't know that it can't attack through it. It'll just try and attack unit on the other side, but its attack gets cancelled. It just continuously does this until that unit is no longer there, or you tell it to do something else. So it's kind of a bug because it tries to attack something that it can't actually attack. Orbital command fixed an issue where Mule could be cast targeting refineries close to command centers. I think this is just something that existed since they tried to make mules be usable in refineries during the legacy beta, where they made it so you could mine gas with mules. Just a small bug fix there. Hydralisk fixed an issue where Hydralisk attacked faster at melee range. So right now, since they nerfed the attack speed by 10%, they have two separate attacks, technically a melee attack and a ranged attack, and they never nerfed the attack speed on the melee attack. So that's fixed. It's not going to really change much because Hydralisks are incredibly terrible at melee range anyways. And then Morph to Lurker will just happen immediately. You can't right click right after and cancel it by accident. So right now, if you tell them to morph to Lurker, then tell your army to move, it'll cancel the Lurker morphs. And you'll see the floating text plus 50 plus 100. Stasis Ward, attack target priority increased. So that means if you're attack moving, your units are more likely to attack the stasis. So if you use them in the middle of a fight and it's impossible to click on them, your units will actually attack them now. And then units affected by stasis can be issued any non-build commands instead of only move commands to be acted upon stasis expired. So this is a pretty big bug fix, or quality of life fix, I don't know what to call it. Right now, if your workers get stasis and you right click on a mineral patch while they're stasis, they'll be given a follow command and not a gather command when the stasis expires. So I'll move to the mineral line, and then they won't do anything, but they won't count as an idle worker. So it's a very weird bug. And it's fixed there. And then Raven fixed an issue where units affected by interference matrix cannot be issued stop commands. So now you can press stop on them if you want them to stop what they're doing. Right now, if you press stop, then only the interference matrix army units in your army will not stop, and they'll keep going forward. Similar, if you A move, then the units that are affected by interference matrix will pretend they don't want to attack and just run forward and die. So it just makes them maintain the distance of their attack range. Okay, my match is in 2 minutes, but I'm just finishing this up real quick so I don't end up 90% on this and go into a game. So Nidus Worm fixed a visual bug introduced in the previous patch. This is just if you selected a Nidus Worm that had no units in it, you'll see a little thing called Nidus creep behavior it's how the game internally tracks the thing that spreads the creep. It's not supposed to be visible. It was an accident that it was visible to players, so it's just, you can't see it anymore. Mutalisk fixed an issue where Mutalisk's attack launch sound would play each time the attack bounced. So it would play the sound that the Mutalisk would make, like the screeching sound when it attacked. It would just play that every time the attack bounced. It's just a small fix there. Zergling fixed an issue where Zerglings could not receive queued morph to Baneling commands. So this just means you can shift queue Baneling morph. You can't shift queue or rally afterwards, so it's not like you can tell them to go somewhere, tell them to morph to Banelings, and then shift queue them into a middle line. It's not going to work like that. You're still going to have to give them a move command after they're morphed. But this makes it work exactly the same way it works with morphing Ravagers and Lurkers, so it's consistent. You can queue morph, and if you press escape, it'll cancel all the morphs at once. You don't have to cancel each Zergling manually. You don't have to hold down escape anymore. Pressing it once will cancel every egg, which is exactly how it worked with the Ravagers and Lurkers, so it's going to be consistent now, which is nice. Fixed an issue where Zerglings and Swarmos cannot be given commands while unburrowing. So there's just an inconsistency where if you unburrow your units, some of them, if you right click, will actually do the thing after they finish unburrowing, and some won't. So now Zerglings and Swarmos work the same as all the other units, just to make it more consistent. Roach fixed an issue where Morph to Ravager would be cancelled with the smart command issued immediately after the morph command. Same thing as the Lurker morph. If you right click right after you give them the morph command, it won't cancel it anymore and have the floating text show up. Plus 25, plus 27, 5 of the resources. Liberators fixed an issue where Liberators cannot be given certain orders immediately after being ordered to unsiege. Same thing as the Zergling Swarmhost. Now, if you right click them to move right after you click unsiege, they'll actually do it. It won't not work. Worker units no longer need to wait for full deceleration before beginning to attack. So this is a significant one. Right now, because workers have a deceleration and acceleration, like when they're going to mine minerals or whatever, they're not actually allowed to attack during that time when they're slowing down, when they get into range of something. They're only allowed to start their attack after they're fully stopped. And now it's just, if they're in range, then they'll attack, right? So it's not going to have an artificial delay on the first attack, which might be significant. We'll see how it actually plays out in game. And then the last one, we went over this earlier. Snipe can now be manually cancelled. Okay, so that's it for the patch. It's a much bigger one than last time, which I'm quite excited about. But now we have to go back into our tournament, which is happening. So let's do that real quick. Ready? Whenever. That was a lot of talking. I need to chill for a bit. Let my voice get rested.
Doraslol just subscribed.
Thank you, Doraslol.
Anonymous gifted Nightbot a subscription. An anonymous user gifted a tier 1 sub to Nightbot.
Okay, let's play Geralt on Data C. 12-month gift sub to Nightbot. I gave the Stream Elements bot my lifetime bot subscription. Not Nightbot. I should get all the commands on the Stream Elements bot. Yeah, the patch is on PTR. It is 5.0.11. That is correct. Ghost range is a fair change? I think so. The ghosts will still be strong in the late game. It's not going to be a weak unit, but there'll just be some bit more counterplay now, which is very nice. Okay, let's go for the classic 18 hatch. I'm actually going to focus because this is my hardest opponent in the bracket, I think. So if we win this match, we should be able to win the finals, I think. So let's try hard in these games. Okay, I should turn off one of these lights. Should be a little less distracting. Yeah, you with your pro press. Okay, no warp gate yet. Is it double chrono? Looks to be. Just watching this as an adept or a stalker.